Yo, what's going on YouTube and welcome to Goal Line Hockey. It's Kevin Forte and today we are continuing the NHL season preview series as we take a look at the Boston Bruins. We know how last season went in Boston. I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole. You guys remember what happened. I remember what happened. What happened this offseason for the Boston Bruins to kind of resurrect that feeling you had at the end of the regular season? What did the Bruins do to give you that going into this season? Well, probably left you a little bit, uncertain. And we're going to talk about that today. So, there's a couple things we're going to talk about. We're going to take a look at the changes to the Bruins, look at some rookies that can maybe make the team out of camp. We're going to take my pick for a breakout player, as well as my prediction for where I think this team will finish this season. We're going to discuss all of that here today. So, let's start off with some of the departures because I think that's really the part that everybody's really watching for. You can't talk about the additions without, unfortunately, kind of addressing the subtractions. Now, the key ones are pretty obvious, and the fact that you will no longer see Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci on this roster definitely leaves you not only a level of concern, but a huge hole in the middle of your center core. And that's been the big topic for the Boston Bruins this offseason, is they are really hurting down the middle. And that's a fair argument. But I think with some of the guys that they brought in, it might not hurt them as much as everyone's kind of making it out to be. Now, let's take a look at some of the guys they brought in. Morgan Geekie is first on that list. Morgan Geekie, who most recently played last season with the Seattle Kraken, drafted by the Carolina Hurricanes. But you look at his numbers the past 2 years. Last season, he had 30 points in 69 games. The season before that, he had 22 points in 73 games. So his first 2 seasons in Seattle were better than his first 2 seasons in Carolina. So in 4 years, his last 2 years have been much improved compared to his first 2. And a lot of that was because, let's be honest, he got more ice time in Seattle because he was further up the depth chart than he was in Carolina. And some people might say, well, you just need your opportunity. That's exactly what it was. Morgan Geekie got an opportunity to get some ice time, and he used it to his advantage. And that's what happens with a lot of these guys in the expansion draft is they go to that new expansion team, and they just weren't given the opportunity at that previous spot that they've now found with that new team. And that's kind of what I think he's stepping into here in Boston. So we'll talk about him in a minute. Milan Lucic returns. I was thrilled to hear that. Now, I know some Bruins fans are a little bit concerned because they're like, well, this is your replacement to Tyler Bertuzzi. I'm not having it, right? And it almost seems like one of those moves where the best way to describe it, let's just say you work at a company and they're not giving out Christmas bonuses, right? But they bring in Dunkin' Donuts for you. A dozen Dunkin' Donuts. Oh, yeah, we love you guys so much. We're giving you the Dunkin' Donuts. They're trying to distract you from the fact that you didn't get your Christmas bonus, but hey, look, we got you this instead. That's kind of what the Lucic signing feels like. And I think that's actually a huge disrespect to Luch, which is really sad because he had a really good World Cup tournament earlier this year with Canada. And shout out to Canada when they won the World Championship. He had 4 points in 10 games playing with Adam Fantilli. So I think he had a pretty good time, and it's maybe kind of getting him ready for this coming season. Now, the last time this guy had a 50-point season was his first season in Edmonton in the 2016-17 season. Don't expect that. His numbers have continued to decline since then. But with that said, this is a guy that can still put up points and is going to be tough to play against. This is a guy that's going to be a fan favorite, just like he was his last time in Boston. But this is definitely not the move that I think Bruins fans were kind of hoping for, right? James Van Riemsdyk, similar situation. James Van Riemsdyk, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I'm taking him any day of the week. But James Van Riemsdyk, he had a tough season last year in Philadelphia. He had 29 points in 61 games. He just hasn't been healthy the last couple years, which is really frustrating too. And even when he is healthy, like in the 2021-22 season, he didn't even put up 40 points. So similar thing. His last 50-point season was the 18-19 season. Basically, he had 48 points in 66 games, and since then, he's really declined, unfortunately. So, James Van Riemsdyk's a good pickup. He's some good depth. He fits that Boston Bruin model, right? That tough power forward that can kind of score, big body. He fits that mold to a T, and that's why I'm not surprised to see guys like Lucic and JVR coming in. Now, on the back end, they also brought in Kevin Shattenkirk. So Kevin Shattenkirk is from New Rochelle, New York, so it's actually not that far from Boston. It's hours and hours away from Boston. I understand that, but we're talking about in terms of the overall map of the country. He's actually fairly close to home. It's a lot closer than Anaheim, right? Well, I think we can agree on that. Shattenkirk comes over. This is a good move for him because, he's no longer on that Anaheim Ducks team, which I love my Ducks, but he's played in Anaheim the last 3 years. That's tough. They have not been good the last couple of years. So he's going to go to a team that has playoff aspirations this year. And I think he's going to find a little spark of momentum going into this season. He's definitely a third-pairing defenseman guy. Probably a guy, unfortunately, at TD Garden after warm-ups, you're going to hear a lot of him on the board for guys that are scratched. But I'm okay with that. I think that's more than okay. He's just a depth piece to add to this team. In all honesty, I like him more than Mike Riley, or what was his name? I think it was Mike Riley, the defenseman. In terms of 1-for-1, I'd rather have Shattenkirk than Mike Riley, but I don't know. Maybe you guys will disagree with me on that, but I think that's an improvement there. Rookies to watch for, Fabian Lysell. Fabian Lysell, I'm cautiously optimistic that he could make the roster. Now, because of their situation with Bergeron and Krejci leaving, it leaves me a little more of an opportunity, maybe to move him into that lineup at some point. But like I said, you've got a lot of bodies that are there. You've got Jesper Boqvist, AJ Greer, Patrick Brown, JVR, Milan Lucic, Morgan Geekie, Trent Frederick. I don't see him really beating any of those guys out of the lineup. So, there's a slight possibility that he jumps in there. He's 20 years old. But he spent most of last season with the Providence Bruins. Are they going to put him back there again? I don't know, but I guess we're going to find out. So keep an eye out for Fabian Lysell. But other than that, no rookies coming out of this roster in Boston this year. And my breakout player, we talked about him at the top of this video, and that's Morgan Geekie. I think Morgan Geekie, similar to what he did in Seattle, I think he's just going to get more recognition in Boston. He's a really good player, and I think this is a guy that could really help the Bruins in a pinch right now because, what's that saying? When one guy goes down, that leaves an opportunity for somebody else to come in and rise. And I think that's the case here with Krejci and Bergeron leaving. Yeah, I'm sure Geekie's like, it's obviously a shame they're big players in Boston, but that means I'm going to get an opportunity to potentially be a top 6 center for the Boston Bruins. And you look at that center core right now, as crazy as that might sound, it kind of is a possibility. With only Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle ahead of him, if Morgan Geekie starts putting up points and we get to the point where we're maybe into November, around Thanksgiving, going into December, and he's already got a couple goals potted in, and he's really producing, playing alongside some of those guys like Trent Frederick or maybe DeBrusk. All he needs is that chance in the top 6, and he might not ever go back to the bottom 6 again. So a really good opportunity for Morgan Geekie. He was a highly prized prospect when he was drafted, and some of that shine has definitely left for the former third-round pick in 2017. But I would keep an eye out for Morgan Geekie this year. I think that's a guy to watch for. Other than that, this is kind of the same Bruins team that we've seen. Ullmark and Swayman coming back. Obviously, that's a huge thing. That's a good thing. But that's something to watch. Jesper Boqvist, another guy to maybe watch. He's played with New Jersey for a couple years. So that leads me to my predictions. Now, the expectations are different this year. And honestly, it's probably closer to where they were at the beginning of last year, right? The Bruins shouldn't make the playoffs this year. I think that would be a real disappointment in Boston if they miss the playoffs. But I'm not ready to say they're going to get another 135-point season winning the President's Trophy, especially after losing guys like Krejci and Bergeron. that is very hard to sell anybody on. I think even the most hardcore Bruins fan would agree that that is a unrealistic expectation. So, what is the expectation? Now, maybe they don't get to 55 or 60 wins this year, but what if they got 40 to 45 wins this year, right? Morgan Geekie plays well, Trent Frederick steps up, so you have two guys down the middle that step up alongside Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle, who are already established and there. You've got a pretty decent defense, some veterans that have kind of sprinkled in there, like JVR and Lucic and Shattenkirk. I think those are some decent moves. Derek Forbert was a really good fit. He'll be returning this season with the Bruins. You have, I reluctantly say that as an Islanders fan, but the best goalie tandem in the league, especially last season with Ullmark and Swayman. Can they put up somewhat similar numbers to they did last year? Even if it normalizes, right, to like steady numbers, that's still really good. My prediction is 40 to 45 wins for the Bruins and between 90 to 95 points. I'm going to do a shorter gap. 90 to 95 points for the Boston Bruins. So, and that is a 35-point difference because they had 135 points last year. So if they're anywhere between 90 to 100 points, that would actually be a lot of a difference there. But this is a different team. They were just winning games that, like, at a whim, right? They could sleepwalk their way, and they were winning games. But it's just different. It's a new season. We start back from scratch. It's a similar Bruins team, but it's a new season. It's a new blank slate. And it's a good thing for the Bruins that it's a blank slate because they can forget what happened in the first round of the playoffs last year against Florida. But it's also a blank slate in a bad way because you have to forget what happened last year. 135 points, 60 wins, most wins in an NHL season for an NHL team during the regular season, 135 points. You got to forget all that because that's the past. And the Bruins are a team that is going to compete. And that division is getting a lot tougher. And that's part of the reason I was hesitant to even give them 100 points because realistically, this is going to be a very difficult division. And even if some of these teams don't make the playoffs, I expect Ottawa to be better. I expect Buffalo to be better. So I think you're going to see a lot more parity in the Atlantic Division between Detroit, Buffalo, Ottawa, kind of rising their way up. And it's going to keep teams like Boston and Tampa in particular, I think, on their toes a little bit. So the Bruins, I think, are a playoff team. I'm having them make the playoffs. I think they're on the higher range of that 90-point range, that 95 to 100-point range. But with that said, this is not the same team as last year, and it's going to be needing guys to step up that were not leaders last year because this has been Patrice Bergeron's team for a very long time. We're going to have to see some new guys step up. And I don't think it's impossible. Jim Montgomery's a great coach. They've got some guys in there that can definitely be the leader and that alpha dog in the room. But somebody's going to need to step up this season and be that next guy. There's been rumors that it could potentially be Brad Marchand. Maybe it ends up being a guy like Charlie McAvoy or Hampus Lindholm or Brandon Carlo. Who knows? But guys are going to have to step up big this season for the Bruins. This is an older veteran room. The youngest guy on the blue line is 24-year-old Ian Mitchell. Up front, the youngest guy is 24-year-old Jesper Boqvist. Everybody else is either in their late 30s or their mid-30s or late 20s. And I think that for this Bruins team, the time is now, just like it was last season. So, like I said, I think this is a playoff team. I think they could go on a run next year. But we need to see how this team looks without some of those key core veterans in the locker room. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a kind of identity shift for the Bruins. Like I said, though, I'm really excited for some of the younger guys. Hopefully Fabian Lysell maybe gets in the lineup. I think that's a pipe dream. But that would be really nice to see him get in there. Going to be weird seeing guys like JVR and Lucic playing in Boston. Patrick Brown, that's a big bunch of guys. So that's going to be really interesting. But I want to know what you guys think down below. What do you guys think of the Boston Bruins? Do you guys think they're a playoff team in 2024? Do you think they miss because of just the parity from that division and maybe a slip up in December ends up being really the nail in the coffin for the Bruins by the time we get into this coming year in 2024? I want to know what you guys think. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to check out the rest of our season preview videos. We're going to be going over every NHL team, similar to the template that we just did here in this Bruins video, so make sure to check those out. I've also got Goal Line Hockey merch, so make sure to check down below in the links. We've got all that stuff down there, so make sure to check out those links. We've got some good descriptions down there. We've got links to Built Bar, my merch shop, all that stuff. Make sure to check that stuff out. So always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.